Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Director's Cut, a podcast by the Directors Guild of America, featuring today's top directors sharing behind-the-scenes stories of their latest films and insights into the craft of directing. Please take a second to subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director Erik Nelson's new documentary, The Cold Blue. The film uses newly restored 4K footage and outtakes from DGA and Oscar-winning director William Wyler's 1944 documentary about the European air war during World War II, The Memphis Belle, a story of a flying fortress, as well as narration from surviving B-17 pilots to pay tribute to both Wyler and the men of the 8th Air Force. The Cold Blue was screened as part of the DGA's documentary series, which aims to spotlight groundbreaking nonfiction films for DGA members and guests by presenting screenings of documentaries as well as conversations with their directors. In addition to The Cold Blue, Mr. Nelson's filmography includes the documentary features A Gray State, Dinotasia, JFK: The Final Hours, Scrapbooks from Hell, the Auschwitz albums, and Dreams with Sharp Teeth, the movie for television Anne Frank's Holocaust, and episodes of the series Pearl Harbor Declassified, Journal of the Unknown, and Secrets and Mysteries. Following the documentary series screening of the film at the DGA Theater in New York, Mr. Nelson spoke with director Sandra Luckow about filming The Cold Blue. During their conversation, Mr. Nelson discusses his collaboration with composer Richard Thompson to score the film, his desire to remove the barriers from the past by using color footage, and shooting the interviews with the surviving veterans from the 8th Air Force.
Well, what a movie. And let me introduce you a little bit to Erik's work. He is a director-producer. He's the president of Creative Differences. In 2017, Erik produced and directed A&E's feature documentary, A Gray State. In 2005, Nelson produced Werner Herzog's feature Grizzly Man, which I kind of think in some ways is a prelude to this kind of work that he does.
Okay.
We'll talk about that. Herzog's 2008 Oscar-nominated Counters at the End of the World and 2011's doubleheader Herzog's 3D exploration of Cave of the Forgotten Dreams and the Death Row feature Into the Abyss. Nelson also directed and produced the 2008 documentary Dreams with Sharp Teeth and directed and produced the 2012 animated feature Dinotasia? Dinotasia. Both A Gray State and Dinotasia are currently streaming on Netflix. So, welcome.
Thank you.
So how should we begin? I think we should begin at the beginning. How did this project come to be for you? I know that you had done all of these films and you had made A Gray State, and you told me you needed a break.
Well, Gray State, the film I did before this, is a very dark ride. It's about an obsessive filmmaker, and the end of the journey is he murders himself, his wife, and his child. It's a really dark piece of work. And after 2 years of living in that world, I really wanted a break. I wanted a spiritual enema, if you will. And I've always had a autodidactic obsession with World War II, World War II airplanes, history. I've done a lot of history work and things like that. So actually, a catalyst for this project is sitting here. Carol Tomko, are you still? There she is. Carol Tomko is an old colleague of mine who landed a great job working in Vulcan Productions with Paul Allen, who shared my autodidactic obsession, World War II airplanes. And being a good hustling director, I sensed an easy mark. So I went to Carol to say, hey, would Paul pay me to root around the National Archives and look for color footage of World War II airplanes? Simple as that.
Now, can I ask you why you were looking for color footage?
Because they're cool. So I brought a researcher in, passed along the money to her, and she kind of gave me a report after about a week, and she said, well, there's the stuff from Okinawa, and there's this, and there's the Memphis Belle outtakes, and I said, excuse me? She said, well, the Memphis Belle outtakes. And I said, what? And she said, oh, yeah, there's 34 reels, 15 hours, everything what William Wyler shot for the Memphis Belles in the National Archives. Oh, they've always been there. Well, and I did a full stop, went back to Vulcan and said, whatever we thought we were doing, we're now going to do this. The whole idea of the cold blue pretty much crystallized in that nanosecond. And, you know, some projects you sweat, and like Gray State just is impossible, and other things just sort of blat out there, and this one just kind of blatted right out there. It went very quickly.
But your first thought wasn't to do the restoration of Memphis Belle?
No, that came later. So the thought was to do the cold blue. As I pitched it, I think, Carol, and you still hate the phrase, Koyaanisqatsi with B-17s was what I wanted to make. And, you know, it's there. You know, there's certain sequences that, you know, Philip Glass doesn't come after us, but, you know, it had that sort of tonality to it. So then, because this is the National Archives, we all own it. Any of you can make the Cold Blue Mark II. The footage is just sitting there. Our 4K transfers are part of the National Archives. We don't own them. They're not proprietary to us. So I'd made the Cold Blue, pretty much finished it, but I always knew the White Whale was out there, and that was William Wyler and the Wyler estate. I could make the Cold Blue. I could do it, but should I do it? And should I do it without dealing with the Wyler estate? So after finishing the film, I tentatively reached out to Catherine Wyler. Melanie Wyler, take a stand there. So we have Wyler. We have Wyler's into house. And very nervously...
Thank you.
And very nervously told Catherine, and Melanie, I think you'll say, Catherine's a force to be reckoned with, your big sister. Told her what I was doing, and it was a somewhat chilly response, and she said, okay, but you know what we, the family, want to do is restore the original Memphis Belle, the 1943 Memphis Belle, and we're looking for a print so we can restore the print. And I said, well, Catherine, I know what's there. The prints are dog shit. Pardon my French. There's two prints, one in the Imperial War Museum and one in the National Archives, and they look terrible. And when Spielberg did Five Came Back, that documentary on Netflix, the moment it premiered, I was deep into the Cold Blue. I watched to see, oh my God, have they seen my outtakes? Nope, they used the bad print. So the Stet version is terrible. And I said, the only way you could really restore it, and I'm not saying we're going to do this, is maybe we have the whole Memphis Belle in our outtakes. I don't know, but I recognize a lot of shots. And that was that. So 2 weeks before Christmas, we finished the Cold Blue early. Again, it just sort of came. And I owed an editor a couple weeks' work. So I said, look, we all know the footage. Just for fun, just for giggles, downloaded the Memphis Belle off of YouTube, take the soundtrack, and see if you can recut it from scratch. 2 weeks later, 500 shots are restored. So the Memphis Belle now has been restored. It never has looked better. It had defects in the original film, scratches that your dad put on the reel in 1943 in a film lab in London. We removed those digitally. And so now the Memphis Belle is flying along with the Cold Blue reboot. And I kind of owed it, now that I think about it, I owed it to Wyler to give his film an equal shot, because it's not fair to compare the Memphis Belle to what I did, because I cheated. I brought it to 16:9. I wanted to restore his original film. And it's great now we do occasional double bills of the two if you really aren't B-17'd out enough. Watch the Memphis Belle.
Well, I actually think that you ought to do a trilogy and have the Memphis Blue be the first film, have Best Years of Our Lives be the middle film, and then have the Cold Blue be the last film, because I think it really shows the trajectory of these men's lives. One of the reasons that I was so excited to come to see the film just when I had RSVP'd, not knowing that I would be actually talking to you, is because of William Wyler. I happen to teach film production at Yale and Columbia, and beyond that, am very much of a cinephile of classical Hollywood, and William Wyler being probably number one of my absolute favorite directors. So when I saw the footage last night, actually, I screened Memphis Belle, a very terrible print of Memphis Belle, to get an idea of what you were actually able to do with the footage. I was really amazed that what you have done is not only restore the footage to the way that it is meant to be seen, probably in a way that William Wyler could only have hoped that it would have been seen.
You had one of those blue scratches out of there. I'm convinced of that.
but beyond that, I feel that your film, in some ways, is more Wyler than Memphis Belle. Did you feel him sitting over your shoulder as you were making it?
I didn't watch, I'd seen the Memphis Belle is imprinted in my, DNA because you see it all the time. So I knew the film, but the entire time I was doing The Cold Blue, I didn't want to look at it because I didn't want him hag riding me for the production. And the only time that I actually turned to the Memphis Belle was during the takeoff sequence because I could not figure out how he put this. He shot all over Germany. So all over England, and they shot takeoffs everywhere. And I did not know how to put this stuff together. So I finally went back to the Memphis Belle, and I was like, oh, of course, and I really had a healthy respect for the cinematography. But I know I didn't really. They're different films, I really wanted to. That's why I was sort of grappling with the propriety of what I was doing, because I'm taking footage that he shot and then making an entirely new film of it. But then Wyler had multiple cameramen shooting the footage. It wasn't like he was directing actors. He just amassed all this footage and put it together as a propaganda film in 1943, very much with the editorial control. It was done for a mission. And this footage still lived there. So, it wasn't like I'm going to remake Mrs. Miniver or Ben-Hur or something, but it was always, hence my call to Catherine Wyler to say, this is kind of an interesting thing. I don't know what you think about this.
But it does feel that you made the film that Wyler would have made as a documentary if he had not been in the military.
If you say that as a Wylerologist, Melanie, Catherine said it. Am I putting words? Everybody's sort of, I've gotten a pretty good sense,
as I continue to look at it, I understand now where his direction came for where he does the graveyard scene.
Oh, absolutely. If you've been in the front end of a B-17, I went on the sound recording. We followed a B-17 around for 4 days with a crew from Skywalker and used the cut of The Cold Blue as a storyboard. So if you see a microphone, if you see a sound effect here, we have a sound effect of a B-17 there. But I got to fly from Vero Beach to Naples in the God Spot in the plexiglass front of a B-17. And these are 75-year-old airplanes. You can't fly 200 miles an hour in plastic anymore. It's something you can't do. You still can't do it technologically.
Never was a good idea, I don't think.
But it was great. But once you got in there and you're inside one of these things, that scene in Best Years of Our Lives where he has the hallucination, which was not storyboarded, literally. He shot that scene documentary style. He went to a B-17 graveyard and set up the actors and shot it documentary style. This was not a Hollywood shoot. He just winged it. And, if you've been in a B-17, you know what that's like. But I was flying from Vero Beach to Naples. He did 5 missions over Nazi Germany, so it's probably a slight difference in experience.
Well, one of the things I also saw last night as I was preparing for this was a short 23-minute documentary about the making of this film that you did. And one of the things I immediately thought was, I need to show this to my filmmaking students because it really shows you first of all, the absolute power of sound and the separate elements in a film that have such incredible emotional impact and how that changes. So, obviously, you talked a little bit about the sound.
The sound design was immersive, and we have the man in the audience. How about that soundtrack, people? How about Richard Thompson? Because
it's so beautifully evocative of the time period and yet completely timeless.
You tend to watch these things, when you have a movie, one of the fun parts about making a feature doc is you get to travel with it. It's the closest thing to rock and roll that you get. You get to see it work on a house. It's like, oh boy, I'm going to ask Bud about Shouldn't you have given that back? Always gets a laugh. And a good audience, which you were, Bud, when he sings his opening song, gets response. You know, if we get people, I know if it's dead silent when the opening Bud song, I'm always a little nervous. But I've seen Richard score, though, you know, work, and I never get bored with it. It's just a perfect wedding of music and inspiration that wasn't what I expected. I had I cut to a wholly different, much more kind of squatsy tone in the film. But the deal with Richard is, if you can have the privilege of working with Richard Thompson and the budget that I had, you let Richard Thompson do what he wants to do. So I'll let you discuss which was paramount in that thing, but he basically went off and did the soundtrack. Richard, can you come up for a sec?
I'd love to ask you a question, Richard. Or give you a microphone. I think there's one here.
Yeah. I know you're not uncomfortable being on stage, but just bear with us.
So I'd like to ask you, Richard, how was this in terms of scoring? You know, you've done other films as well. You are a rock and roll guy. So how did you approach this?
I think emotionally, I had a very emotional reaction to the footage, and I was trying to think how to respond to that, how to orchestrate that, and I really thought fairly early in the process that some kind of chamber orchestra would do it. We used 4 horns, string quartet, string bass, oboe, clarinet, harmonica, percussion, which is a small. I mean, in Hollywood terms, that's nothing. That's very, very small. But we had a great engineer. We had a fabulous Capitol Studio B to work in. Wonderful Capitol echo chambers.
Those drums, the drum recording, and those drums are awesome.
Yeah, fantastic. And you know, if you're doing a soundtrack to a film like this, it's beset with problems, and the main problem is the sound of the planes. You know, the planes are a very predominant sound on the soundtrack, and in some cases, the planes are droning in a key, or sometimes they're droning in between keys. So a lot of the key choices were because, you know, the planes were in A or you know, E flat. You know, this is just like a starting point, really, for the film. In some cases, the sound of the planes was tuned digitally to come into a key. Interesting stuff. But you know, Erik sent me the footage, and just said, get on with it, basically. Thank you, Erik.
Well, we did 3 things. We're among friends here and directors, so I did the cut with temp music and the guys done, you know, cut and done. And then I shut it all down, and I sent the cut to the sound designer, I sent the cut to Richard, and I sent the cut to their restoration team of 2 people, did all the film restoration, both working, one in his condo and one in his basement, who did all the film restoration. And we reconvened in 3 months. And I was obsessed with the sound design, and the restoration I let them deal with, and Richard had the music, and I didn't hear the music until it was recorded, and I wasn't at the sessions. It really was recorded, and they started sending me tracks, and it was just, oh my God. And it was such a kind of jump from what I had envisioned and what I had attempted. I admit, when I first heard it, I was like, well, this isn't the movie I made. It's different. And then the more I started hearing it, it was like, this is really amazing. And it's like, wow, this is a better movie. And it's like a way better movie. And I had nothing to do with it as the director, other than leaving Richard alone. So don't let that get around to my other directors, but it really was, it's all on Richard here.
Well, 2 kinds. So having just been sent the raw film by Erik, I kind of composed wall to wall because it seemed to need it, and I was unaware of what sounds were going to be added to it. So I probably composed 75 minutes of music, and then we selectively took stuff away rather than added. So that was the process, really.
Because first it worked, we alternated. We did a test screening at Skywalker. A guy named Ben Burt is sort of the guy, the professor emeritus, and Ben is the Star Wars, created the original, is a legend of sound design. And he attended the screening. And so we had the benefit of a charrette with all these, Brad Bird wasn't there, but was in the hood with all these people. And he said a couple things. One, George and I watched Memphis Belle 30 times when they were doing Star Wars to get that sort of the sounds and the cutting sequence down. And then his suggestion was that the music was too scored. And, it was too scored. And then I went back to Richard and we discussed it, and we took the music out in the air during the scenes that don't really need a lot of support. And then the beautiful score was in the other chapters, the more quiet chapters. But it wasn't that literal. And I'd say all the music's Richard, and 75% is where you put it in the original thing?
Maybe.
Yeah. I don't know. See, I'm wondering, when we see it together, I'm always thinking, ooh, he's mad that I moved that cue around. So,
Well, it's the price of doing film scores. It is you're a slave to the process.
Well, speaking of slave to the process, Richard improvised the score to Grizzly Man with Werner. And not that it was my first film with Werner, as I don't know if you know, there's something of a reputation for being Werner. And Richard had never worked with him before, and we had no time to do it, so the idea was we're just going to improvise the soundtrack. So I put Richard, and then I thought, this isn't stressful enough. I'm going to make a documentary on it. So I brought a documentary. We filmed a documentary of the making of the sessions. And totally different animal, and that was my first. So compared to that, this was...
Yeah, but it's very unusual to improvise a film score. I mean, it really happens. But I was in a situation where Werner also insisted on being on the studio floor.
No, I think on the studio floor or hovering over you.
Hovering over my shoulder. So there's a camera here and there's Werner over here. And somehow they'd say, okay, can you make this next cue 13 seconds long?
Gentlemen, I have to ask you, did you not watch Burden of Dreams before you started working with Herzog?
Oh yeah, no, I knew exactly what I was getting into. I was supposed to direct Grizzly. I had found. You mentioned the similarity earlier with Grizzly Man.
Yes, let's talk about this.
I found the treasure trove of Grizzly Man. That was my stuff that I found and got the rights to, and I was going to direct it. And I won't get into the How I Met Werner story, but he pretty much hijacked the project from me and said, I want to direct this film. And I'm like, okay, dude, take it. I don't want it. But I did it because I wanted to see what Herzog would do with the material.
But this idea of finding footage and creating something new from it has sort of become your life's work.
Well, God, I hope not. But the three projects that have had it was Grizzly Man, which was the death spiral of an amateur filmmaker, Gray State. Death spiral of amateur filmmaker, except he was a director who wound up murdering his wife and 5-year-old daughter. Feel bad movie of 2017, folks. Check it out. And then this, which is William Wyler's material. So if one wanted to do that, yes, but then I've done lots of other stuff. But
I understand, but what responsibility do you feel to other people's footage?
Well,
then?
We've discussed it. It's Treadwell. What I do think I would have said to William Wyler, to Timothy Treadwell, maybe not David Crowley, but was, did I do your work justice? What do you think? Is this the film? Is it honest? And even David Crowley, his family, his brother, his sister, his father, worked with me on the film, and his friends, most importantly, all said David would have loved this, and that kind of creeps me out. But I have thought about it, and I've written about it. I did a column in Talk House called Collaborating with Ghosts about this process of collaborating with ghosts. Now, this is by far the most benign version of it, because it wasn't, William Wyler shot this, but the Memphis Belle evolved. It wasn't quite the same thing. But yeah, it has crossed my mind.
Can we talk a little bit about the visual, about the color? When you think of, oh, thank you.
Slinking off stage. Okay, there you go. Thanks, Richard.
When you think of old-fashioned documentaries, of newsreels, of World War II footage, you think of black and white. And there actually was quite a bit of very cool color footage that was shot during this time. And it's so interesting if you think about how people think about black and white. This used to be as sort of the arbitrator of truth, that something had to be black and white in order to be true, a documentary style. The New York Times was the last newspaper that actually, as all the news that's fit to print, the last major newspaper that actually went to color photographs because they didn't want it to look like the comic pages. They wanted it to be, serious. And then when footage, when Spielberg, for example, made Schindler's List, he insisted that it be in black and white at a time when films simply were not selling in black and white. I mean, they told him it was a death sentence for him to make Schindler's List in black and white, not only about the Holocaust, but about, but being in black and white, it would die at the box office. He went ahead and did that because he said all of the Holocaust films he had ever seen were in black and white. Then when he went to make Schindler's List, now I read this somewhere.
Private Ryan.
I'm sorry, Private Ryan. When he went to make Private Ryan, and I don't know if this is actually true or a legend, but it's a good one nonetheless. He was going to make that in black and white as well because he had seen
Robert Capa's photographs. I mean,
yes. Every World War II film he had seen had been in black and white.
Well, Robert Capa shot 29 pictures in Omaha Beach, and like William Wyler, wrecked it in the lab. And the 30 photographs that were outtakes are the emblematic Omaha Beach D-Day pictures. And if you look at those pictures and you look at the opening to Save It Private Ryan, it's like nailed it. But apparently it was his father who said to him, I was in World War II. I fought there. It was not in black and white. If you want the immediate experience, it needs to be in color. And so hence he went ahead and he shot Private Ryan in color, but then he desaturated it almost 80%. And I found it really interesting watching the terrible print of Memphis Belle last night, thinking, wow, this really looks like Private Ryan. And in its faded, and then I started thinking about memory and what we associate with memory. Well, there's a genre now that's come out. I think the twist that got the Peter Jackson film so much attention in December was this concept of black and white, something you traditionally see with this perspective being brought into color with immersive sound design. And when I started on the Cold Blue Trail a couple years ago, I had this vision of this thing, what I called big screen immersive history. I was really influenced by Dunkirk, and I wanted to do Dunkirk, surround sound, abstract, and have that sort of approach to a war documentary, except I had real footage. So, my regret is we didn't get Cold Blue out in theaters. We premiered Cold Blue a year ago in June. Jackson's premiered October, and Apollo 11 came out in January. So technically, if you're looking at the rule books, we got out first. We didn't get out first commercially, which I regret, because I think this has that kind of... The idea to use color, to get to your question, was to construct a time machine. I didn't want anything between the viewer and the material, which is why you don't see the guys till the end of the film. And Richard's music carries you through. It was really to hypnotize people and to go back in the past. I don't know if anyone's seen a movie called Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve. It's the best time travel movie. But he goes back in time, and then he's propelled forward. He loses his connection with the past because he finds a modern penny in his pocket. And I didn't want to have any pennies in this film. I didn't want to have anything that ripped you out of the past and brought you forward until we meet the guys, because the audience, I hope, is thinking, when they see them, it's like, oh yeah, who are those guys? And we wanted, plus I had to make 72 minutes long, but we only shot I shot about 10 minutes per guy. We didn't film their interviews. I made the decision to do it audio only because I could get closer to their good ear and do a more immersive, better interview. So our procedure, our protocol, and you can only get an hour with these guys, hour and a half tops. We'd arrive, we'd set up, it was me and Peter, the producer, that was it. We drove cross country, the two of us, rented a car from LA to Baltimore, stopping off. I'd go in, I'd get my trusty, as featured in Gray State, giant laptop. I'd show them 10 minutes of footage, some of my restored test footage, to get them wired in. I filmed that part and then shut it all down and then sat down and talked to them. So they were already vibed into the moment. And because I knew what I had, I knew what footage I had, I was able to, well, what do the contrails look like? You know, did you have a dog? You know, I basically knew what they were talking about. So there was kind of a and it wasn't about what they did. It was how did you feel doing it? You know, it was much more, again, an immersive thing. Tell us what it was like. What do those things look like? And I'd have to say, if there was one image that I had, that contrail sequence, when I saw the contrail footage in the Memphis outtakes as I was putting this together, it was like that, you know, that. Because Wyler just would film it. He didn't cut it in 1943. He wouldn't just let a shot of a contrail go, an abstract contrail shot. But what's great is his cameramen were clearly like, wow. And they were shooting these images, probably knowing, you know, that none of that footage, little of that footage is in the Memphis Belle. And some of the really abstract arty shots, like the Dawn, those shots of the planes, the B-17s in Dawn, none of that's in the Memphis Belle.
And yet it ended up looking like Leni Riefenstahl's opening. Well,
yeah, they shot it beautifully. That footage of the stuff at the Open with the women and the defense plant workers, the morale tour. Again, we're among friends here. I'd like to say this was just conceived as a metaphor for the America of today versus the past. And no, I had this amazing footage that I could not figure out what to do with, and I needed a dimension to make 72 minutes. So I thought, I have a lot of exposition to get out, and this footage is great. Let's just throw that at the top of the film with with the cards, and then do an overture, which is where we, you know, he died while his son was born. With that shot to really get you focused, and then the rest was just chapter, chapter, chapter. I mean, it was ridiculously easy to put it together. This one was, and it isn't because of any expertise on behalf of the director. It was because it kind of had to be put together this way. We had this kind of had to go here. This had to go here. You needed to put all this together. So it kind of made itself in a lot of ways, which is really unusual for me. Things usually are much more complicated.
And I love your love letter in it to filmmaking itself, where you use the tails and you use the sprocket holes there. And there's, I mean, I think it's quite brilliant that you do. You know, you could cut to the man with the tears in his eyes, you know, saying, and that was the day that the son was born, and yet you used the entail. It was so, really nicely.
Well, Charlie Chaplin you may have heard this line. He said, great line. Every comedy director should say this: if what you're doing is funny, you don't have to be funny doing it. And yeah. And Nelson's variation of that is, if what you're doing is dramatic, you don't have to be self-dramatic doing it. So if you have this amazing footage that's just so intrinsically glorious, you don't need to sort of trowel it on and go for I made enough bad television history documentaries where you always have to go for the thing.
I found the color in it so achingly beautiful, and putting
Kodachrome.
But putting me in the moment. In some ways, it got me to thinking about this idea of my own memories of tragic things, and I often thought, like, well, how would I feel if somebody showed me a faded photograph of the plane going through the Twin Towers at 9/11? I mean, it's so connected for me and puts me back in the place. I mean, I walk out some September mornings and say, oh, this is a 9/11 day, in terms of the color and the vividness. And I think that, getting that back is such a service to getting us back in time.
Well, it's funny, I did a film on 9/11 called 9/11: The Final Hours, which is all set on September 10th. Every scrap of footage of 9/11, tourist photographs. There was a woman artist in the 96th floor who shot the thunderstorm that night. We made a film based on that, which again takes the iconography of 9/11. And the only thing we didn't show was the planes hitting. It was audio only. It's sort of like, we were very careful to take 9/11 through that filter and be really rigorous on it. And that ties into kind of the Cold Blue in some way, where you kind of dance what brung you. So the 9/11 film, because there was so little footage, dance rehearsals in the plaza, it enforced a rigor on the storytelling. So all you had to do is just say, well, we have this, let's not mess with it. Oh, and the other footage we had was a photographer and graveyard shift engineer who was obsessed. It was from Estonia, and he'd just come over, Barat, the engineer, who took all these weird pictures of every nook and cranny of the towers, offices, people's desktops, just because he was fascinated. And we discovered 1,000 of these pictures and used those as a thread. And again, they just worked. And, so the film, once you sort of get this Timothy Treadwell's footage, honestly, Grizzly Man's this and that, it's not too fucking hard to do a movie when you have 90 hours of that guy on camera in that proximity. Even I could have directed that film, and I was going to. Now, Herzog lifted it up, but the actual footage is so powerful, which I think is why in this world of acquired footage documentary, it's always, well, is that a legitimate documentary if the footage is there, if you're not shooting it yourself? And I would say knowing what to do with it is
well, it's not
something.
What's Up, Tiger Lily?
Well, let's not diminish that classic, but I was just at the History Channel actually pitching a film involving the Mystery Science Theater guys today, so it shows you thinking of riffing on funny movies, but I digress.
Eric, thank you so much for
thank
this
you.
gift. Thank you all for coming out on a Thursday night. This documentary series at the DGA, I think, is incredibly important, and hopefully demand more of it, because it really is, not only is it educational, but it's an emotionally evocative evening. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more from the DGA's documentary series screenings, check out episode 201, which features director Peter Bogdanovich discussing his documentary The Great Buster with Chuck Workman. You can find past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, if you're enjoying our podcast, please take a moment to rate and review us on iTunes. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow cinephiles find the show. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.